up on the next slide? Yes, we have speed Drash, y'all, because really we were supposed to do Genesis last week, but because we had this fabulous tabernacle celebration in 2 different locations, and then we were missing Simchat Torah with our congregation, we had to do that. But then to stick Genesis in there, it was going to just be too much. So we thought, okay, well now we're really behind because now we're in Noach. Noach is the parashah portion for this week. So now we're going to back up and do 11 chapters of Genesis. Who's on board?
So you just thought we were going to be rushed.
So we're going to do 11. We're going to do 11 verses, Bereshit 1 through 6, and Noach 6 through 11. And so the children in their curriculum, they're going to start in the book of Genesis also. And so the teacher, Tekia, is going to take the children with her today.
Yep.
So who all's ready for that? We dismiss you officially into your new class.
Because I'm going to go ahead and cover parts of it. Okay. So, this is it's called a hermeneutic, which is a method of study, method of Bible study. And it's a common method of Bible study in Messianic communities. I've actually taught on this before. Y'all may or may not remember. If you do remember, this is a review. If you don't remember, take notes, because this is going to come up later on. Okay, the word is called pardes. That's the word for this type of hermeneutic, and is it an acrostic? It's where the letters represent other words. Acronym. I should know that from all that time spent in the service. So here's what it means. There's 4 levels of study or understanding of Scripture. Okay, the Peshat, the first one, is the surface, the basic meaning. Like when we read, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Well, on the Peshat level, that means that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's the Peshat. The Remez is the hints or the allegory. It's the just beyond the literal. Let's go back to Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. A remez behind that might be the fact that he created plural heaven and one earth. There's kind of a hint of something going on there. You see where I'm going with this? Okay. So heavens, I'll just take some of Carol's thunder. Shh, don't tell her. Heavens would represent not only the heavens, but like the universe. And the earth, because Genesis 1:1 can also cover the entire creation story, would represent the end result of God's creation event. Okay, so Genesis 1:1 is making an announcement. God did this. He did step 1, but it's also the announcement that he's the one who completes everything that we're going to read later. So there's a hint there. The Drash is to inquire. Whoops, get back. Yeah, the Drash, inquire, a comparative, is to seek. We're going to see this later. It's like if this, then that. When we see later when God says, "Let us make man in our image." Okay, the Drash behind that the Drash level might be something like, what's this us about? Okay, if there's an us, then when God, Elohim, makes that statement, there must be something else going on there. If that, then there's something else going on. Well, when we understand that the word Elohim is plural in its design anyway, it means a plurality and unity. Elohim does. So then when we read, "And Elohim said, let us," it's the royal we going on there. But see, there's a midrash going on within that verse. If this, then there's got to be something else. It always points to something else. And of course, the last one is the sud, the esoteric, the hidden, the secret meaning. People get off the rails on this one a lot. I'm going to let it go at that, Mike, because they just get off the rails a lot on this. Everybody wants a sud understanding, but nobody wants to mess with the peshat. So here's the reminder for this. These are progressive. You can't get to the sud or sud unless you've dealt with the peshat. And if your sud understanding, if your deepest understanding of a passage or a scripture or whatever, if it doesn't still line up with the peshat, then you're off track. Okay, so all of these have to line up. You can't just go like off the Stupidville with God said, let us. Well, he checked with the higher courts. I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't have said that. But there's an example of getting off the rails, okay? Because the courts of heaven, let's just say that that's not real good theology. Matthew, I'm going to let it go at that, okay? Because I could go down that road for a minute. Okay, so we're going to use this because as we're going through and we're studying, we're doing our speed rash. Either Carol or I may throw out a question. Okay, this that we've just looked at, where does that fall? In these 4 places. We've got some nuggets we're going to share. And so in that point, we might say, Gretchen, where does this one fall? Is it the Peshat, Drash, Remez, Sud, whatever? But don't just throw out a word, because if you say that it's just the Peshat, then we're going to say, well, why is it just the Peshat? Because see, there are some verses that all there is the Peshat. And that's where the problem comes in sometimes when we try to find something that's just not there. When we get into the lineage, and there's a lot of lineages in these 2 Torah portions, well, when you get into the lineage, there's nothing else to dig out of there. It's just if Adam and Eve, or Eve gave birth to Cain and Abel, well, that's it. There's nothing secret underneath that, you know. So sometimes all there is a peshat. Sometimes there may just be maybe 1 or 2 of these. There might not always be all 4 applications in each part of your study. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. And I saw some of y'all taking pictures. Great, take pictures or write that down because you may need this later. All right, the rules of the game or the instructions. Carol says they're not rules. It's just what's going to happen because we have a lot to cover. And believe it or not, we're going to get it covered. Take notes for your personal studies. That's kind of the big thing. This is going to be like a teaching midrash. So we're going to kind of drive the conversation. But there's another thing that's going to drive the conversation too. The slides are timed. James? I might. You got any money? Yeah, I'll send them to anybody that wants them. And that for the folks online too. If you want the slides later, I'll send those to you too. But because we got a lot to cover, the slides are timed. So, and I'm not timing them with the clicker. We programmed in a time for each slide. The slide when the slide flips, we're done with that one. We're moving on. Yep. Because that's what I just said. It's not in the clicker. I programmed each slide. So that when it flips, we're done. If we're in mid-sentence, we're done. Okay. We're going to be applying to Part S, just like we said. So as soon as Carol comes up here and sits down, we'll start. Because when I hit the next slide, we're on the clock. They're right here. You tell them.
If we have time at the end, we can go back and address.
Turn your microphone on. Have you got your mic on?
Okay. So take notes and anything, if we get done, okay, it's 4:05,
Right.
roughly.
Yep.
And we're only going to go till almost 5.
Yep.
So.
That was the plan. Okay,
Yeah.
ready?
And if you have a question, please raise your hand really high so I can get you this mic as quick as possible.
Yeah, and really fast because we don't have a whole lot of time. So here we go. Ready?
You got Roadrunner Declan for one of them.
That's right. Here we go. That's it. We're on.
Right.
We're literally on the clock.
All right. So,
That didn't look right.
something happened. with the
What happened there?
Bereshit chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So one thing we noticed in this is the earth is singular, but heavens are plural. There's another translation that actually says God created the universe. Instead of saying the heavens, he says the universe. But the heavens could mean that there could be multiple layers of heavens. Like when Paul says, I knew a guy who had gone to the third heaven. Third heaven. So we know that there are levels of heaven, and then one of the levels is where God's throne is.
It's the abode of God. Yep.
So does he mean that there are maybe levels of heavens when because it's plural, not singular?
Well, that's a Jewish understanding about the third heaven. That whole idea. There's the heavens that we look at. We step out the door and we look up and we see the heavens, the sky.
That's right. And then we see the stars and the constellations and the different,
and that's considered like the second
galaxies.
Heaven. When you get to the third heaven, then you've entered the realm of the Most High, the place where he's hanging out. So that's, and there are, in Jewish tradition, there are, I think it's like 5 or 6 levels of heaven with like the high, I forget the number.
Although that could be Kabbalah.
Yeah, and it probably is. So
Kabbalah, yeah.
So all we know is just what Paul said when he said,
right.
I knew a man who went to the third heaven.
That's really the only witness we have of that.
Right.
Okay, so moving along. So God's Spirit brought light on day 1. Did y'all catch that when you were reading? It was really interesting to us to see that because the sun's not created until day 4. So where'd the light come from? It was probably his Shekinah, or the Shekinah as it's pronounced in Hebrew. So God has his own personal light. Because remember in the book of Revelation it says there's no more need of the sun or the moon or the stars because now the Lamb, or maybe it says God is the light.
God is the light, yeah.
In the book of Revelation, that's how we get that witness to what this is saying.
So in verse 3, when God says, let there be light, and there was light, and that light, verse 4, it was good. God divided the light from the darkness. Well, Fabian actually had a thought on this one about the darkness representing the realm of darkness, because like you were just saying, there's no sun yet, so there's that. It's like God draws that separation. It's like I'm the light. That's not me. That whatever's going on over there is not part of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, that was good when
So
you
his
found that
Shekinah.
one. Yep.
And then we have the separation of the waters.
Now,
What verse
have you
is
thought
that?
about that? The separation of the waters? Let's see, verse 9.
Okay,
Sorry,
there we
go back to verse 6. Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters. What?
Yeah.
So remember, verse 1 and 2, earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep.
Yeah, it's formless, it's void, it doesn't really have a shape. I kind of
Right.
picture like this big splash of water out there, just kind of doing this. Yeah, and I think there's one translation that says chaos, which is not the chaos we know today. It just means that it was
Unformed.
It was not organized
Yeah.
yet.
It's
So
in primitive state, so
it
to
was
speak.
it was in a very primitive state. So we have like this big water blob, and now God's going to separate those two. And
Right, the
doing
waters,
this.
so that we get the waters above and the waters beneath. Now, what's interesting about the waters on the top protected creation from the solar radiation, because the firmament, if you look that up in your Greek, in your Hebrew, James, you'll find that the Hebrew word is rachia.
Oh yes.
Rachia actually means a crystalline shell.
Wow.
So God actually put the earth inside of a capsule, if you will. And this crystalline shell was of a color that has anybody ever used blue blocker glasses? You know how like everything looks like super bright? Or like if you're wearing shooting glasses, it's like
polarized,
polarized
right? Yeah, for
glasses.
fishing.
So the rachia, think of that as this big polarized shell that was around the earth. So everything, all of the colors would have been much sharper.
Yes.
And I'm old, but I wasn't there. I'm just giving you the information that we have from other people who have done this research. His name's Carl Ball. And actually with the rachia, the earth was actually compressed. It was smaller than it is now. which is why things got so big, because the atmosphere itself was super saturated with oxygen.
Yeah, oxygen rich.
Yeah, it was oxygen rich. Well, Norse and Cynthia can tell you, and Robin probably can a little bit too, if you've got something that's oxygen rich, if they want to help a wound to heal, they'll take a person and put them in an oxygen tent.
And a
Bariatric chamber. Why?
Yes, there you go.
Because that oxygenated pressure helps the wound to heal faster than it would
yes.
before.
And people lived a lot longer, as
They
we're
live
going to
longer,
see later on.
and you can see through the layers of the earth that everything was larger at
Slide
that
change.
point. Whoops, there we go.
Now
we're
we're going
done.
to go into the single land mass. Did y'all catch that? Where God separates the waters from the land. So you have land
10.
and you have water. And so you don't have the divided continents like we do today. And it was referred to as Pangea, a single land mass.
Verse 9. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters God called the seas. And God saw that it was good.
Yeah.
And it was you can actually look up the word Pangea, P-A-N-G-E-A, and you'll find out that it's understood that and if you actually look at the continental plates today, and you can just like take a globe.
And flatten
Everybody's
it.
seen the flat globes, and if you look at the continental plates, you can see how they would actually fit back together.
Piece them back together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because at one time it all was in one place, and we're going to prove that later in Scripture also.
Yeah.
So day 5, she brought this one up, and I
Let's
thought
see,
this
God
was
creates
good.
the sea creatures and the winged birds, and he tells them to multiply. Yeah, just one of those things where, when Moses is writing this, he says that God speaks. God's speaking to his creation. He's telling them to do certain things. Well, do you think that since he's speaking, are they hearing a voice? Are the animals understanding him? Are they using the same language? Because on day 5, he created the sea creatures and the winged birds, but then day 6, he creates, along with man, he creates everything else, the livestock, the wildlife, including man.
And it's kind of like and on day 5, it's like he created the two ends. Okay, the two
Right, yes, something
the two extremes.
something
Because
beneath and
y'all,
above.
in case y'all didn't know it, the ocean's deep.
Yeah. Lots
So
of
it's
sea
like
creatures.
he created the sea creatures to live way down there, and the birds which fly way above us. The stuff in between wasn't there yet, so he put it. It's interesting that they're almost like bookends. It's like he put those two things together, because especially later we see where, the fishermen, seafood becomes a staple of life. Because, we'll get to that.
We'll kind of sit on that one.
Yeah, we'll sit on that one for now. So he creates livestock, wildlife, and men. How many of y'all, besides me, thought that on day 6 God just created mankind?
I don't always remember. I'm thinking it was just
I'm
man
the only
on
one
day
that failed
6,
that class
yes.
then.
Yeah.
Because I never thought about, okay, it's like he created all the, because the birds breathe. Yeah, he created all the land creatures. Yeah, that walk.
Yeah, creatures that walk on the land. That's right.
Yeah,
yes.
he created all them at that one time. But what about bugs and stuff?
I think when it says crawling things would be insects.
Which absorb oxygen in their own way. I mean, they might not have lungs, but they still absorb oxygen in their own way. Yep. Was that all we wanted for that
I
one?
think it is, and the slide has already changed.
Okay.
So mankind is. I think the reason why we only think mankind was created on day 6 is there's so much information here. He's created in the image and likeness of God. This is our first introduction to where God is referring to himself in plural. Like, is he talking to somebody else? Because we know that angels can't create. We know that there's only one God. So here we have the first introduction of the word Elohim, which is also a plurality, and then the word Echad in Hebrew is a plurality in unity.
So if you were going to guess where this would fall in the hermeneutic that we talked about at the beginning, what would you say, Gretchen?
Oh, you mean what Pardes is it?
Yeah.
The very first part, Elohim. Oh, you're bringing me this.
It's
It's your job, huh? Okay, well, I'm going to say that is the very first one, which I don't remember.
The Peshat.
Peshat, because it's just like, that's what it is.
But remember the other part where we talked earlier about how you have this. Which one are you thinking? So Sherry says it's a
hint.
remez because there's a hint.
Yeah, there's a hint to something.
Because Elohim is plural. But see, again, we don't really get that idea, which is why we encourage y'all to have available to you a Hebrew translation of some sort, so you can, even if it's like a J.P. Green's, where you can follow along with the Hebrew and get the Strong's numbers, so you can look in your concordance and see what's there. Because in our English translations, God it's a singular. We don't get the Hebrew application
And
behind
a lot of
that.
times people don't study, they just skim over it and they go right down to verse 27,
Yep.
where then God switches back from a plural to a singular, where he says, so God created man in his own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them, male and female. And we all go, whew, okay, right, God's one again. Because we don't understand why he's saying he's a us. You know, so a lot of times we don't study, so it would be the remez,
Right.
where you're inquiring now. Or
You're
the
inquiring.
drash also. The
You
drash.
could call it a
have
drash if this, then that.
Yeah, where you're talking about it, you're discussing, you're curious to know more.
So all creation lived an herbivore life. I bet Robin would like that.
Oh, yes. Everybody was
Everybody
vegetarian,
was that's
Robin.
right. Everybody was a veterinarian.
That's right. God gave seed-bearing plants and trees as food to humans, wildlife, and the birds, and everybody's eating vegetation.
But
And I think so.
we
yeah.
will. Yep. I think so. So that means eat all the brisket we can now.
Eat all the barbecue you can.
Just saying.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something to people living longer, too. Remember we talked about, the oxygen-rich firmament, and then we also have, people are eating proper nutrition, and that's leading to longevity.
Which, of course, and this causes a bit of a stir, because if you've studied at all about the, what they call prehistoric animals, y'all do know that Adam walked with the dinosaurs, right? There wasn't like these two ages when all that stuff going on. But when people look at those particular creatures, there's like, okay, well, wait a minute. They must have been carnivores because they all have these fanged teeth. Well,
And claws, yeah. No,
maybe not.
they're ripping open nuts.
Could be, because remember,
And hard-shelled-
everything is huge.
Yeah, tree trunks.
Yeah, everything is huge.
Coconut shells. Yeah, they're ripping open
So
shells and
that's one of
nuts
those things, and there were other things going on. Anyway, just to say that this is still true, there's no contrast there. There's no contradiction about what we see in the quote prehistoric record.
You got to watch your.
Whoops, are we done?
Maybe we
Okay.
should bring that closer, Rabbi, so you can
Well,
see
I
it.
see.
So God
Well, you're
created
watching that
everything
one. They're all
in 6
watching.
days, and He rested. I'm not sure. I guess when you pulled in this into a different computer, the fonts
I didn't get the
changed.
right font. Anyway,
That's
go
why
ahead.
it's not.
Okay.
We're not
This
that bad at
chapter 2.
graphic. We're not that bad at graphics. We promise. God created everything in 6 days, and then rested on the seventh. Now the seventh day is the only day that He specifically declared to be holy. Have you ever had that drash with somebody where they say, "Well, the Shabbat's really or the Sabbath is on Sunday"? You're like, "Well, no, God didn't make Sunday a holy day. He specifically said that the seventh day was holy."
And let's get one thing too, is that that's the only day that God made holy, but man is the one that made Sunday.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
let's if we could look at it from that
That's
aspect
right.
as well.
Yeah.
That's right. Sherry?
Yep. So, yeah, sun worship.
worship.
Oh yeah, no.
That's all she
Everybody
wants
online
to say.
gets to
She
hear
just
what you
wants to say
say.
sun worship.
Yeah.
Sun worship.
Thank you. Well, yeah, that's I mean, that's we'll do a study on that one sometime later on about how we got to that point. But that's what it boiled down to, sure.
Yes.
But-
And then we also might want to point out that it probably wasn't 1,000 years. It was probably a literal 24-hour day.
We support a young Earth understanding. We are a creationist congregation that believes in the young Earth. The Earth is not billions of years old.
Millions or
Thank you very much.
Are you shocked?
So Fabian's gone. Right there. Microphone, quick.
Thank you, Yabel.
I have a question.
Okay. You better be fast.
You might want to write it down too in case the slide changes.
I agree with you that the earth is young. I'm not gonna say it's million of years or anything, but sometimes I think, didn't the earth exist anyway before Yah came and fixed the earth? Because the earth was already there. It was just not arranged and organized the way it is now. So
it was a blob in outer space, maybe?
yeah, I
Okay.
am wondering,
Formless and void.
maybe it's older, just from the point that it was organized, it's young. Like,
Right. But you know what? It
You know what I
says he didn't. It talks about he created everything in 6 days. Now we're talking about the vegetation on the earth, the people, the animals, the sea creatures, the birds. Now we're talking about just the earth itself, not before. Because he didn't talk about what he created
But
before.
I get what she's saying.
Yeah.
But there's a bu- if there's but if,
I
if
do
there's
too,
a,
yeah.
if there's a before, then there's room for mommy and daddy protozoa.
right, but there's just a question that comes to my mind sometimes. I wonder about that. Like, you
And
know.
that's a good and it's a good question. But I think when we look at the Hebrew implication behind like Genesis 1 and verse 1, the implication there in the context leans toward the idea that before God created the heavens and the earth, there just wasn't.
And it does say in the beginning God created. We don't know how long the beginning was. But our next slide.
It just changed.
Adonai gave the
But
earth.
he had something before that. So.
And so okay, so just
Doesn't it say that a day is 1,000 years?
Okay, this is the what
That's
this
a
You know,
different.
we-
that's a different
we
thing.
need to cover that at the end
Okay.
after we're
All
done.
right.
But that's great. That's a great question. So Adonai gave the earth to mankind and to tend and keep. So mankind's first sin was disobedience. What
and
were
it
we
was-
going to say about
and
that?
it was disobedience over food.
Yeah, that's right. The first disobedience was about food.
Do you want to get somebody's real? If you want to get, if you you step off into your best friend's church service and tell them they're not supposed to be eating bacon, you're going to have a fight on your hands.
Or if you just say, I'm not eating bacon.
Why not?
Yeah,
Haven't
'cause-
you been? You know, you've been delivered from that.
But I mean, yeah, right.
You're no longer under
But
bondage
you can't
to
go to
the
someone's
law.
church and tell them they can't. But you can
I'm
say
just
what
saying
you're not doing.
that food
Yes.
was the issue then,
Then that was like, it was the very first
and
thing.
food is the issue now.
Yeah.
You can get folks. You can get folks on board with the Shabbat. You can get them on board with the idea of the 7th-day Sabbath. You go messing with their shrimp cocktail, you'll lose friends.
That's right.
So I mean, so it was food then. It's interesting that the original sin, which was disobedience, but it's centered around food. We're still dealing with that
Yeah.
today. Perhaps, Gretchen, a remez into that whole thing about the disobedience around food, if we bring that forward, maybe a drash, if that, then this, is that today the biggest problem that people have is with food. You know, whether it's a lack of food or whether it's too much food. There's the food becomes a problem, just like it was a problem then when God said, "Don't touch that." And they went, "What? Why?" But okay, Matthew, quick.
And I would suggest it had to do with lust. He got her to lust, see that it is good. And we are visual. Mankind is visual. And if we see an ad on TV, I want that, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So he got her to lust after it, and especially the United States culture is the same.
Yep.
That's a very good point.
Okay, so man and animals communicated with each other according to verses 18 and 20. That's in
Yeah.
chapter 2.
So that's just, that's just one of those things that we just kind of thought about as we were reading through that everybody's kind of talking to, God's talking to the animals, and man's naming the animals, and so everybody might have the same language. They're all kind of talking and communicating because man's not eating animals, so there's a relationship there. But before the slide changes, we just want to point out here that
Okay.
man was created from the dust. Write down that question. Man was created from the dust, but woman was created from the man. I thought that was interesting to point out.
Well, even the Hebrew names.
Because God created mankind, He created them male and female. We have here Hebrew for man is Ish, Hebrew for woman is Isha.
Isha.
But God created both of them at the same time as humankind, as mankind, and then he puts the man to sleep and he pulls the woman out. So she's created from the man, but the man's the one that's created from dust.
Right. Mike, go fast.
So now, Mike, you have a few seconds.
Like communicating with animals, we still have that. The fall didn't totally remove all that.
Oh,
My cats talk to me,
That's
not
true.
in English, but they talk.
that's right.
And,
Yeah, I just
in
don't
some
understand
ways.
what he's saying.
and
That's a good
raccoons are
point.
not afraid of me. They're afraid when I have a bag of cat food in my hand. You know.
That's right. Because when cats are upset, they tell you about it, right, Diane? When a cat's not getting what they want, they will tell you.
But when we look at verses, that's what I'm saying in chapter 2, in verses 18 through 20, there's that idea that God was waiting for Adam to communicate with the animals and see if he could find a helper that was suitable for him, because verse 20 says that. Cynthia, go ahead.
It wasn't just man that formed from the dust. He formed every creature
Yes.
and the birds from the dust.
Except for
That's
woman.
pretty cool, except for woman. Yeah, that's so,
So
cool.
Which
where
makes y'all pretty special
That's
So
right.
where did he make man is my question.
over there.
Where?
Where, because it doesn't say it was in the garden.
That's right, he placed man in the garden.
He placed him there, but where did he make him?
We're done.
So Yobel had a question, but can
I
you
know she
write
had a
it
question.
down?
Write it down.
We're going to
'cause
try to
Write
cover
it-
these.
write it down,
Yeah.
write it down.
We're moving on.
We're going to
moving
do
on.
this really, it's speed drash, but we're going to get to these questions at the end, so if we
Yep.
could just keep moving.
Okay.
So the crafty serpent speaks and Eve understands. Interesting. So what inspired the serpent to deceive? Oh, these fonts are,
Yeah, no, what inspired the serpent to try to deceive Eve in the first place?
yeah.
What drove the serpent to deceive Eve in the first place? The spirit of envy? Okay, I can buy that, Cynthia.
Because man was made in God's image and he wanted to take the authority of the earth away from man.
Oh, boom. That is so good.
But why would just a serpent? I'm driving for a point. But why would just why would just a serpent do that? Oh,
Yeah. And he
So how did
wants
it get
the
there?
authority that God's going to give man.
so write down that
So-
reference too.
So there you have the
Revelation
first.
20 verse 2.
That's right. So the first blame-storming session.
Yeah, the first blame
So-
storming session. You know
so-
what blame storming is, right?
That's right.
Not my fault.
That's right. So
He
God, so God talks to Adam. He's like, "That was the woman," and he talks to the woman, and the woman says, "Oh, it was the serpent." And then God talks to the serpent. So we have somebody's phone. Okay.
Yeah, we had Teresa's Tarzan phone back there.
Tarzan phone. That was perfect, y'all. Right? That's
Was
right, 'cause
Tarzan
we
there in
have
the beginning too? I was just
Right.
wondering.
'Cause
Yeah,
couldn't
so
you-
the first blame storming session,
'Cause I
because
think
God shows up
Tarzan-
and says, Adam, what have you done?
Tarzan could speak to the chimpanzees,
He could,
right?
yeah.
Yes, that was perfect. Yeah.
God shows up, he says, Adam, what have you done? And Adam says, ain't my fault.
So God is speaking
She
to the
did it.
humans and the animals, and they're all speaking to each other. This is what was so amazing to us, is that they're all sharing the same language. They're all communicating together. And then out of that comes the first messianic prophecy.
Yep.
Do you want to read that? That's in verse,
Yeah, because we're in
That-
chapter 3.
we are in chapter
That's
3.
verse 15, quick.
And that's where it says,
Verse 15, and I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. It will bruise your head, and you will bruise his heel.
so there you go.
Right there.
Because the serpent was cursed.
And that's where the conflict is, where the Lord prophesied that, this is the cosmic battle between humanity, between evil and good.
Uh-huh.
I think that's where that starts, is right there.
That could be, certainly. Go ahead, Robin. Quick.
And it's kind of interesting that the serpent gets the death blow before he strikes out. I'm like, wait, is that kind of like the order in which it happens?
He's not a snake at this point. He's actually on all fours. He's a serpent.
He's a serpent.
He's like a dragon.
Yeah,
And that's what
yeah.
it says. That's our clue
Yeah.
in the book of Revelation, that he's actually a dragon. So dragons
Did
don't
I say
strike.
snake or did I say serpent?
You said before they
Or
strike.
before he struck
Yes.
the heel. But it was kind of like, oh yeah, he receives the death blow to his head, but then maybe as a last ditch effort, he's trying to strike back and
Well, I think
bite
it's
his
just-
heel,
yeah, it's just-
but it's
just
you
a
know,
prophetic-
it's not a lethal wound.
Yeah, it's
at
just a
this point.
prophetic statement.
But, yeah.
Because the adversary
Yeah.
tried to kill Messiah. Okay? In the end, Messiah won.
And that's going to happen in the future. So
Right.
that's prophetic.
Yep.
So not happening at that time. But we want to point out the very first sacrifice created designer clothes from animal skins. It was the first messianic type and shadow. So you have God himself who had to sacrifice an animal to get the skins to clothe Adam and Eve. Because what did they put on as clothes? They just grabbed fig leaves and other things and sewed stuff together. So they were sewing just the vegetation. But God actually gave them animal skins like leather or suede. So those were the first that was the first sacrifice.
So if we took that, where he talks about how God clothed them with animal skins, what verse is that? That is...
we didn't write them down.
Yeah, verse 21. Unto Adam also to his wife did the Lord make coats of skins and clothed them. So you could take this for that whole, the hermeneutic. There's obviously the Peshat. There's obviously the Remez, because there's a hint to something going on there. There's also a Drash, because it's an if this, then maybe that. Fabian? Sherry? Okay.
I was just going to allude back to the verse that you just got through talking about, the messianic prophecy, the first one.
Yep.
It's also, I was reading, there's 5 curses placed on the enemy in that first chapter.
Oh, okay.
Chapter.
That's good.
Okay. Go ahead, Sherry.
So with the animal skins, this is the first time that death actually entered the world, because an animal had to die to get animal skins.
Yes,
That's
the first
exactly right.
sacrifice, and God did the first sacrifice.
And
yes.
God's the one who did the sacrifice.
Is that written in there where they had to kill, they skinned the animal in there in the scripture?
It's not. That's why it's on a sod level, because you really have to dig for it. You have to come to that conclusion. If they are clothed in animal skin,
What's
something
that,
had to
Jackie?
die. Yeah, so it was God who did it. Yeah. 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 So God was the one that did the first
I said
sacrifice.
God clothed Adam and Eve, so he
Killed the
them.
animal.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
God had to kill an animal to obtain those skins
But
to clothe Adam and Eve.
so before we lose this one, because it's all 4 steps.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously Peshat. There's a remez going on. There's a hint about something going on. Why would God do that? They grab fig leaves. They already got themselves covered up. So why did God see it was
That's a good
necessary to do
question.
that? Okay, that's
Very
a
good
hint
question, yeah.
going on. The Drash, if this then that, there's something else going on. In order to get clothing, in order to get animal skins, an animal had to die. Okay, that throws up the why. The sud level is what's up with the animal skins? Well, the animal skins clothed their nakedness, their sin, because of the blood of the animal that was shed.
Oh.
Messiah, because of the blood that he shed,
Yeah.
covers our sins and gives us his righteousness. Covers
yes.
us with his
Yes.
skin,
Oh, that's
if you
good.
will.
Yes.
So that's all
why it
4
was the
levels
first
right
messianic
there.
All right, thank you for
Yeah.
coming,
Yeah.
guys. Appreciate it. That was great, Dan.
Yeah. So consequences.
Yep. Still chapter 3, consequences.
Yep.
Y'all do know that every time we are disobedience, there is a consequence.
Yes.
Whether you see it now or you see it later, there's a consequence. It's not a case of God's out to get us or God's going to get you for that. That's never the case. Especially once we get into the Torah, Deuteronomy 28, he just says, look, he doesn't say, I'm putting this on you. He says the curses are there. Here are the curses.
Right.
If you disobey the commandments, here are the curses. So it's like we disobey, the curses are just out there. Prime example, if I'm going 75 on Highway 45, I'm good. If I go 105, the chances are real good I'm either going to have an accident or John Law is going to come find me.
Right.
There's going to be a consequence to that decision.
Right. Well, the consequences are the ground is cursed because of you.
Yeah,
You're
for
only
them,
yes,
right.
exactly. And we had something else about the relationship changing between mankind
Completely
and Adonai
changes.
is now changed.
Right.
Because now animals have been killed to create clothing.
And they've sinned. Before this, they were in perfect harmony with God because they had committed those. Remember, they were innocent.
Right.
And so their innocence, it's like an innocence lost. In this moment, their innocence is lost because they have done what God said don't do. Because remember, when the Lord shows up after they'd eaten the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, where are you? We're hiding. Why are you hiding? Because we're naked. Who told you?
And so Hava is going to have increased labor pains. And then they're also going to be working these thorns and, what else does this say? Thorns and thistles.
Thorns and thistles, which are not there before.
Right. So, in fact, it says God is the one that planted the garden and placed man in the garden. So he didn't have to plant anything. He just had to tend it.
Yep.
Okay, hasn't changed yet. Okay.
Okay.
I'm moving on down. Okay, so I have a question. I really do, because when we were studying this, it just hit me. So when you get to verse 24 in chapter 3, it talks about him stationing the cherubim, and in my version says, and the flaming sword, which turned in every direction. My question is, could it be that the flaming sword is an entity?
Oh. I hadn't thought about
it could
that.
have been, yes. And this is the first mention of angels, by the way. Do we have that on the slide?
Yep. First mention of angelic beings.
First mention of the angelic beings, and they could be, because it doesn't say the cherubim was holding it.
But every drawing that you see shows this big angel holding a sword.
Correct. Well, it doesn't mean the artist is correct.
That's not the point.
Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper is not correct.
It's not. That's not the point. All of us have been led to believe that there's one angel guarding the garden.
But this
cherubim is plural.
It's plural. Yeah. Yes, Greg,
so
that's right.
the cherub, and you can read about them in Ezekiel, the cherubim, they're frightening creatures.
Yes.
And so God says he put the cherubim, it almost sounds like all of them, around the garden to guard its entrance.
But there's only one sword. There's
along with that flaming
angels,
sword.
one sword.
So Cynthia, I don't know. That's a good observation. It could be. I do know that when I looked up the Hebrew regarding the flaming sword, it just simply says, basically, a sword that was on fire, or a weapon that was on fire.
Oh, wow.
Are the cherubim, are they the ones with all of the eyes and the wheels?
The wheels and the wings?
Are they the ones in Ezekiel's vision?
Mm-hmm.
Like the most frightening looking things I could possibly think of.
I wouldn't want one to show up.
Okay, so here we go. Chapter 4. Cain and Abel and the acceptable sacrifice.
That's right. One of them brought an acceptable sacrifice and one didn't. The one that didn't bring the acceptable sacrifice, well, now God tells him, you know what? Sin is crouching at the door, but you can rule over it. You can control it.
What?
Doesn't just happen. We allow things.
So you're saying that God warns us?
Well, I'm just thinking, when she says that, I'm just thinking, so that means like I didn't, is this thing on? It means like I didn't have to come in with an attitude today? Oh,
we allowed it, yeah. Oh,
just saying. There it is. Matthew.
The way is revealed from the beginning. If through Yeshua, it's the narrow path, but he was telling his children the way in order for them to rule over sin. Abel brought the blood.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, that's right, yes. And thanks for bringing that up, because my thought was maybe his sacrifice was perfectly fine. So what was the sacrifice he brought? Maybe a bunch of vegetables, and we think, maybe they were rotten. They weren't the first ones that came out of the ground. He just brought whatever he wanted to. But maybe he really did bring a good sacrifice, but it wasn't as acceptable because of what you said, because it wasn't going to bring about the sacrifice with the fat offering and all of that. And so God just accepted that one more than the other one. It doesn't mean, but he was offended by it. And he felt like he had been rejected. Maybe that was his real sin, is the attitude he had, and not the sacrifice he brought.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
there are volumes of midrashes about around that too.
Volumes, yes,
yep.
I'm sure.
Yes, Cain was the firstborn.
Yep.
Yeah, she thinks
and so there could have been some jealousy
little Miss
there.
Tarzan back there thinks she can get away with not using a microphone.
If Cain was the firstborn,
yeah.
Maybe he had an attitude that said his should have been better than his brother's.
Yes.
And that's one of the midrashes that's out there, is that he was a matter of arrogance. It was like, okay, well, if I got to do this, fine.
He was jealous. My baby brother
here.
got
Yep.
Yeah,
Could
yeah.
it be that we were meant to just eat plants, and Cain was a gardener, or he made food and grew that? Abel was with animals, okay? And could it be that mankind was supposed to just eat vegetables and things like that, proteins from things that God grew?
At that time, that's all we ate. That's
Yeah.
what our food was at that point.
Yeah, so that sacrifice of the flock, I mean, I think he was a shepherd of flocks because they were making milk and cheese. I mean, and clothing, right, yeah.
And I think this is one of those cases where we've got in this, there's an underlying thing there that we haven't completely fleshed out yet. Matthew.
If it had to be to bring forth something acceptable through the blood because of the
Yes.
very first sacrifice.
Something had to die.
If we just bring something from the earth, remember God cursed the earth. It could not be acceptable if we just bring, here God, we're just bringing him our cursed works.
Oh, that's not bad.
That's good too.
That's pretty
That's a
good,
great
yes.
observation. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, Robin, quickly.
And then, of course, the blood cries out.
It seems like, okay, for Cain, or his original Hebrew name, Cain, that means like acquired, or it's kind of like bought or earned, kind of like when Eve has him, she's like saying, I earned this baby. Now we can break the curse, and maybe this one can step on the serpent's head and stuff. But then eventually when Seth comes along, Seth's name means granted, kind of like he was a gift.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like works and earning, like you can't earn God's grace, but it's a gift to you.
That's pretty good.
That's it, yeah.
That's very good. Thank
So
you.
the sin's crouching at the door. It's interesting that we see that the blood cries out. Now, a lot of folks toss around about that. We'll come back to Cynthia right directly. Notice that it doesn't say the voice of your brother's blood cries out. It literally says that the blood cries out.
Because the
Cynthia.
life is in the blood, and that's what we find
What?
out later in Scripture.
My version says the voice of the brother.
Yeah, that the Hebrew says the blood cries out. Dom kalal, the blood kalal calls.
Yes,
out.
and we know that it's revealed later on that the life is in the blood of the creature.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the screen changed.
It
Yeah,
changed.
there you go.
Okay.
So the shift takes place. Look, from in God's image to the human father's likeness.
That was pretty cool. So in verse
So
3,
Adam
yeah.
was created in the image of God,
Mm-hmm.
in the likeness of God. And then in chapter 5, we see where
Yeah,
when they had
in verse
Seth,
3, yeah. Adam was 130 years old when he fathered a son in his likeness, according to his image, and named him Seth. According to his image,
right.
yes.
And you're right, Robin. Seth was a gift,
Mm-hmm.
and Eve identified how he was a gift. He was a gift to replace Abel.
Yes, because my son Abel was killed.
Right. Yeah. Well, because Cain was still alive.
And
Yeah,
she
and Cain was
uses
still
and she
alive.
uses seed in that word versus where you go back to chapter 3 on the seed, where the
Uh-huh.
seed comes in too.
Right.
So there's also a connection there.
And so I also see here, we see the introduction to the concept of being transported or translated or
And not like
taken up
moving
or-
from one realm to another, not dying.
because of who?
Because of who?
Enoch. That's our first example. That's our first introduction to the concept of even being translated from this realm into another realm.
Yeah, it's interesting. He was 65 years old, and it says Enoch walked. This is verse 21, 22.
Mm-hmm.
Enoch walked with God 300 years and fathered other sons and daughters. So Enoch's life lasted 365 years. He walked with God. Then he was not there because God took him. So it's our first example of someone being transported and not dying.
So yeah, because that if Enoch had died, the scripture is very precise. It would have said Enoch died, just like it does with all these other fathers figures that are here. He had other sons and daughters, and then he died. And
Do we have any kind of like a witness later on as to what he's doing at this time? Is he coming back? Is anything? Is he a witness somewhere?
we don't know.
Anything?
There's a possibility.
Yeah.
We don't know. There's some people that say that Enoch and Elijah are going to be the two witnesses because they never died.
Mhm.
And I guess there's some
Enoch and who?
Enoch and Elijah.
Elijah.
Yeah, he's in the mix. And so there's God buried him.
Oh,
And because God buried him,
But you're right, and also in Revelation it says that the plagues of Egypt, the only person who did that was Moses.
Yep.
So you got that as well. So there's a lot of Elijah, Enoch.
Oh.
Yeah.
We've changed. Okay, we're chapter 6.
Oh, here we go. The sons of God. So this is our introduction in chapter 6 to angels leaving their station. Do we want to briefly read that? So
Sure, we
it says,
can.
when mankind began to multiply on the earth and daughters were
This
born
one
to them,
causes trouble.
the sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind. So we have a distinction here. We know that the sons of God are not human because it specifically says daughters of mankind and the sons of God. And they took any they chose as wives from themselves. And the Lord said, my spirit will not remain with mankind forever because they are corrupt. Their days will be 120 years. Man, bam, we go from living 900 years to now
Yep.
God's only going to tolerate 120. And the Nephilim were on the earth both in those days and afterward. When the sons of God came, the daughters of mankind who bore children to them, they were the powerful men of old, the famous men. Yeah.
So, this is all. This is a. Let's skip this verse. This
Well,
everybody.
you can because there's the Nephilim in the
Right.
flood and a
Everybody
mikvah.
tries to skip the verse because nobody likes what it says. I don't like what it says either, Jackie. But all I'm left with is what it says. I can twist that, I can turn that, I can tie that in knots, all I want to. But when I read the Hebrew, it's Ben Elohim. That's sons of God.
All right.
We're left with no other.
So you're saying angelic creatures came down and procreated.
Yep.
Like they were able to do that.
Don't know the particulars, don't understand.
And possibly are they still doing that today then?
Who knows?
Because not all the Nephilim died in the flood because we have a little bit of
Wait a
evidence of that. Oh, there's Mike.
You know, I hear that, but on the other hand, I have a question about that because Yeshua said that when he is asked about the woman who is married 7 times and who her husband would be in the resurrection, and he said, well, they're like the angels that are not given in marriage.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how could it be angels that cohabit?
But look at what he said. He said they're not given in marriage. They don't marry. He didn't say anything else. He said they don't marry.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
look at the text.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that they didn't do something evil, an evil act, and
Because
just,
they left their station. You know, because we're reading, is it James, where it talks about how they're kept in
dungeons of
in
darkness.
dungeons of darkness until they're judged. Anita?
My understanding of them is they were the offspring of the fallen ones.
The Nephilim are.
Yeah. So
But
they had already
the
been
sons of
kicked
God
out
are-
of their station
Yeah,
before.
well, but the
Yeah.
Nephilim are the sons of.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You
The
have
sons
the
of
fallen
God.
angels.
Yeah, the sons of God are the
and the
angels
daughters
that
of
left their
men,
station.
and then their children were the Nephilim.
Nephilim.
Yeah.
James?
I'm just wondering if this all happened before the flood.
Uh-huh.
Does that mean it's happening now?
It could.
Well, again, that's kind of what you were saying earlier, because you had.
Because if they were able to do it
Let's-
back then.
Okay, Sherry, go ahead.
They talk about in like First Kings where they talk about giants in the land where that's
Yes.
what the Nephilim were. So
Og
yeah,
of
they were
Bashan
there
and-
after the flood.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, how does that work?
Yeah. Who is it?
Because God
I don't
said.
got answers.
What?
Goliath. Goliath is a giant after the flood.
But it could
The
be
Philistines.
it could be that Goliath is just a giant, not a Nephilim.
Well, that's true.
Yeah,
That's a giant.
it is a giant.
Yeah.
I'm again, we
Mics, people, mics.
what, Teresa?
We need to
We
get.
have people that are
we need to
7
get
and 8
Fabian a
feet.
snack.
That's
now.
correct. That doesn't make them
So-
Nephilim.
Exactly.
Nobody likes to go here, but the bottom line is that the Nephilim were the product of the angels who left their station.
The fallen angels.
God says that the only people who survived the flood was Noah's family and the animals on the ark.
Yeah.
That everyone else, every human being died.
And that was a mikvah for the earth. This is the first
It
time
was
we
a
see.
mikvah,
It was
yep.
a cleansing. It was a baptism for the earth when God did that.
Do-over.
In fact, He made the waters go 20 feet. That might be in another slide, so I won't go there.
No,
but,
we've already passed
But
that
you
one.
have like
No, there
this,
it is, right there, yeah.
You have
Mikvah
this
for
like
the
if
earth.
anybody didn't know how big the ark was, larger than a football field and 5 stories tall, y'all. That's interesting.
It wouldn't have
Yeah.
killed the fish.
Yeah.
Although there were some fish that you see that are caught in the silt. Go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick as a thought, we don't know where the Noah's sons, where Mrs. Noah and where the other wives come from, and the genetics could have carried
Oh, that's
the
good.
Nephilim trait throughout, just
Yes.
because we don't know what they were carrying in their genetics.
Yeah, it could have carried
And
the
so
trait.
it's
a good
potential
point.
that would genetic code was within their bodies.
That's
Right.
a
Because we
great
don't
point.
know.
Thank
Yeah.
you for bringing that
Could have
up.
carried that genetic
You're
code, but
welcome.
again, that does not make them Nephilim.
You're at One Flesh
One
Union,
Flesh.
so you're going to take credit.
So, right, because again, Noah's family would have known about the Nephilim. So, now just track with me for just a second. I'll make this quick. So they come out, they get off the boat, and they're talking to their kids about these huge creatures. Well, you knew we used to have Nephilim. They were the mighty men of valor.
Yeah.
So the next time the kids later that see a big person go, that must be a Nephilim. When in fact it may have just been the physical traits, the DNA traits, but didn't make them a Nephilim, because the Nephilim or Nephilim were a very specific group of individuals.
Right. Well, weren't they also the Rephidim? Because the spies, when they went into the land, they said, "Oh, we saw Anakim there. We
Yeah.
saw the
Yeah.
descendants of Rephidim.
Rephidim,
These
yeah.
giants, and we looked like grasshoppers."
Okay.
So if we had an oxygen-rich atmosphere still, couldn't there have been larger people at the time because of the oxygen?
Oh, that's a good.
For
point
sure,
too.
yeah.
And that might have been enhanced the DNA or the
Could have been.
chromosomes to could create larger.
Okay, we
people.
change slides. We're done.
Good thought, Norris.
Right, chapter 7.
2 pairs of unclean and 7 pairs of clean. Okay, before you started eating biblical kosher or biblically clean, did you catch that with Noah? Or was it after you came into the understanding of your messianic walk that Noah also gathered 7 pairs of clean animals? Because why is he going to do that? Because now they're going to be meat eaters and they're going to be sacrificing clean animals. And so God told Noah what animals would be acceptable as food. And the 2 pairs of unclean are not going to be eaten. They're just
Right.
going to repopulate.
Yep.
But we also caught this, y'all. Did you catch this? We don't know why God created 7 pairs of, he had them collect 7 pairs of the birds of the air.
Not necessarily clean.
It
Just
just
7
says,
pairs
it
of
just
birds.
says so they can populate and spread over the earth.
Yep.
That's in chapter 7.
So what I found interesting too is that Noah's family sat in the ark for 7 days waiting for the waters.
Oh, wow.
The
Can you
door's
imagine
not
that
closed
scene?
yet. So,
Would your faith have been tested at that point? Oh, man.
because
Wait a
so
minute.
anybody that wanted to could come on board the ark and go, Matthew, what are y'all crazy? I mean, you've got your entire family living on this boat. What for what?
They could
Why?
have had a whole protest going on with, people saying,
because people could have come in
"You're
and
an
out of the
idiot,
ark.
you're-" Yeah, exactly. They could have been mocking them and
Okay.
I compare that to a time of grace, like the 5 virgins, the 10 virgins, the 5 ones that were wise and the 5 that were not. How Yah gave that time of grace for them to get ready and to get in, and they weren't ready, and the door closed, just like
Oh
with
yeah,
the 5.
yeah, that certainly would have been.
Oh,
But when
so you're saying that people could have gotten on the ark in faith if they wanted to. God was giving them an opportunity. Wow. But it was testing. Maybe it was testing their faith and giving grace to other people. That's good.
could have been.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's good. But there's also the thing about, because remember, Noah's building this boat in his front yard.
And he's been doing it for 100 years.
Norris, what are you doing, dude?
But-
It's gonna rain. What?
But people are living 600, 700, 800 years too.
Right.
So 100 years to build something, it would have been like maybe 10 years for us.
But because of what God says about how bad it was at that time, that there was a lot of harassment going on
And
while
God
he
said
was
they were all
building that
corrupt.
ark.
God said
Yeah,
they were all
all
corrupt, and he was
corrupt.
grieved in his heart that he
Yep.
made them. So much so that he even let animals die. All right, James, go for it. No?
Oh, pure slide. Okay. I hope you wrote it down so we can talk about it later. Okay. All right. So it was Adonai who shut the door. I'm coming back to what Yoel said. So it was God that shut the door. That 7 days of grace. Okay, here's your opportunity. Because when you think about it, now when you study, about the ark, the thickness of the timbers and all that kind of stuff, it probably would have been relatively soundproof. But you know that they could all go up on the top of the ark, and they could still
right, 'cause there are
get
3
outside
decks.
and all that kind of stuff because there's 3 decks. If it had been Noah who was responsible for closing the door, then when he heard the people outside,
Oh, he would have closed it sooner.
because he was a man or he was a righteous man,
Yeah.
well, either he would have closed it sooner or he would have been tempted to open it because he didn't want to hear that
People crying.
what was going on.
and
So when God
screaming,
closed the
yes.
door,
That's
the
right.
door was closed. That's it. This last chance, this is it, which is another one of those situations of a drash
Do you think
or
Noah?
remez. Because in the final day, when he shuts the book of life, we're in a period of grace.
And Fabian was
Did-
Matthew?
just
Fabian?
in this day and age, like we were talking to some people earlier that you think Noah and his wife felt guilt. It's an assumption because we don't know.
Yeah.
But felt.
Yeah. Why us? Lord, why are you saving us? Can you imagine who here has been to an amusement park and you're on a roller coaster, you're strapped in, you're getting ready. It's not happened yet. You're getting ready. I can imagine they were in the ark. They're strapped in, they're ready for something, but they don't know what it is.
That's right,
And
they
they're
have no idea.
anticipating, and now the door shuts. Or you're starting to go up that track, you're like, what am I in for?
Because remember the last
strapped
bullet
in.
here, the earth watered itself. It had never rained. Now
Yeah,
unless
that's
you've
right.
studied this, there's a tendency to step over this, okay? When you read the text, it talks about how the fountains of the deep erupted.
Yeah. Like
Now,
the geysers in California,
Geysers.
right?
And when
Yeah.
you investigate this and you look at those who have researched this, the scientists that have researched this, that those geysers, those jets of water when the fountains of the deep opened up, would have
Burst.
gone possibly 10 or 12,000 feet into the air. These were not some little bitty springs that also went boop
Yeah.
and
And they
stuck
were
up.
violent. It was cracking the earth open.
And remember, there was the waters below the firmament and the waters above the firmament. So
Yeah,
when these
that's right.
fountains of the deep
Yeah.
broke the firmament up, y'all, it was not a thunderstorm.
That's right, because God separated them at one time.
It was water literally pouring onto the earth. James.
Yeah, the science behind that is the latent heat of condensation. 'Cause
Okay, go ahead.
If it would have rained, the heat given off from the steam turning back into moisture would have literally cooked the earth.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, that's how it happened. The fountains, that's where we got
So
the
it had to be a
actual rain
super
of the-
cooling that took place in order for the earth not to be cooked, because he's going to cook the earth later.
Yeah.
So and then of course, we know that the ark was 20 feet, or the flood waters were 20 feet. The text usually says the mountains. So it could have been just 20 feet above the highest landmass point at that point, because if you know anything about geography or geology, what we see now when we look out there at the Rocky Mountains, okay, there's a lot of, it's called heaving and cleaving. There's a lot of heaving and cleaving that has taken place in order for the Rocky Mountains to even exist. The Appalachians and the East Coast, the same thing is true.
So all of that
All-
happening in the seas
Yeah.
would have been so violent with all the rest of the water that possibly a lot of the sea creatures, Cynthia, did get killed.
Yep. Teresa?
Okay, I'm going to be quick because we have a changed slide. Could the
That just changed. Go
when
ahead.
when the fountains erupted, could that have been when the Pangea separated?
I think so. Quite possibly, but we're going to get to that as we're going
Well, I
on.
think
Okay.
it only could have happened when the waters receded.
Yeah, because we're getting to that one. Okay, so the raven and the dove, why?
Yeah, why does he choose a raven?
First.
And he uses it twice.
They are unclean.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder why
that's
we'd
a
pick a
good-
raven first. It's not, the text doesn't tell us.
It doesn't.
Then we could sit here all afternoon
So this is like a drash.
going over this one.
And a
Yeah.
remez.
But, so the ark came to rest in the 7th month. Now, I like it actually came to rest on the first day of the 7th month.
Well, let's get back to the raven real quick, because
Okay.
the raven was sent out and never found anything. It went to
Yeah.
and fro, but it never returned to him. So like Sherry was saying, it was like
I
maybe
don't care what Sherry's
darkness
saying.
was being sent away. But the dove being sent out and coming back with an olive leaf, both of those things represented peace. So
Yeah.
now Noah's going to be entering a time of rest, which is what his name means, and a time of peace because it's the dove and the olive branch, both representing peace, and the raven being unclean. Well, the dove, I think, is a clean bird. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. But the ark came to rest in the 7th month. 3 months
The
later.
first day of the 7th month.
The first day of the 7th month. Okay.
Does that mean that the ark came to rest on the Day of Trumpets?
Well, like we were discussing though that the whole time God's talking about months and days in Genesis, He's not created that calendar yet.
Right.
We're talking about in His life. It's possibly in Noah's life in the 7th month after he entered.
After he entered the ark,
Yes.
perhaps. Yep.
Mhm.
We don't
Yeah.
know.
So it wasn't the 7th month on God's biblical calendar yet.
So-
You think so, Gretchen? It's just conjecture. His countdown.
Noah's
yeah.
countdown.
Yeah,
yeah.
On Noah's timeline.
So it's
yes.
interesting that it rested. So the ark rested. 3 months later, the mountains appeared.
That takes a while.
So think about that level of water.
Yeah.
But it was 40 days later when he sent the raven out.
Mhm.
So the earth would have been abating all this time, but it took 3 months for just the top of the mountains to be seen. Wow.
Mhm.
So could there have been, as Teresa was pointing out, with all of this that's going on, if the fountains of the deep break up, then that obviously is going to mean that the crust of the earth is also going to break up in order for the fountains to erupt.
Mhm.
So that could have been the beginning, Teresa, of the whole earth continental shifting and movement and all that sort of thing. So the mountains that began to appear might not have been the mountains that Noah was familiar with
Yeah.
when everything happened. For all we know, conjecture, for all we know, the land during the time of Noah may have been relatively smooth, or maybe it had like what we would call rolling hills,
Mhm.
but it probably would not have had the huge mountain peaks that we know today.
Because the cataclysmic of the waters, or the cataclysm of the waters would have created all of that.
Because again, when God created the
Pushing
land,
things up.
it
Like the
was
Grand
good.
Canyon
right.
was formed.
And when we read about the land itself, it just says God put the waters in one area and the land appeared.
Yeah.
So,
He separated the earth from the waters.
right.
You know what I was thinking too? It's like, talk about preparing for eating that whole time. He had to feed his family and all the animals.
Whoop.
Talk about like prepping.
Yep. So here we go. So Noah builds
and,
an altar.
and God knew exactly how much food they would need for that amount of time.
Chapter 8 continued. Noah builds an altar. This is the first mention of the word altar,
Yep.
specifically for sacrifice.
Mhm.
And Noah builds it. Now, how did he know how to build it?
Yeah.
Just tossing that out there because we
Right.
don't know. He just built it.
We don't know.
Is there a possibility that because Noah found grace, he was a righteous man, God recognized him as a righteous man, is there the possibility that when Noah came to that point that God simply placed in his heart what he needed to know to build an appropriate altar for that moment? Because we don't have any instruction. When we get to the Torah later on, we have specific instructions about how the altar is supposed to look, whether it's a stone altar or all that sort of thing. But in this case, maybe God simply gave Noah, opened the top of his head and went, here you go.
Just like he told
This
him
is how
to
it gets
clean.
built.
Just like he told him to clean animals.
Yep. Well, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. The Torah at that time written on his heart.
Just like he knew all of the clean animals together and those birds.
Yep. And then we have the first everlasting covenant.
Yeah.
It's the first everlasting covenant. There was a covenant with Adam, but it was not everlasting
It was broken.
because Adam broke it.
Mhm.
And God's covenant with him was, you keep and you tend this. There was like the earth covenant. And so that was not specifically an everlasting covenant. And the reason I say that is because when we look at the covenant with the rainbow, God says specifically This is an everlasting covenant.
Yeah.
So this is the first time that God identifies a covenant as being everlasting. And the covenant was not with a person. Even though God says to Noah,
Yeah.
I will establish my covenant with you. Noah was representative. Will you turn that thermostat up back there?
Yeah, people are cold.
Noah was representative of all of mankind and mankind who would be. And animals too.
Yeah.
So this covenant that God cut, and he talks about it when he says, verse 21, sorry,
In 22?
no,
As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest. This is the end of 8, because we've moved on to 9 now.
yeah,
As long as the earth endures.
yeah,
seed
as
time
long
and
as the
harvest.
earth endures,
Cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night, and day and night will not cease.
will not cease.
Mhm.
So man's relationship obviously changes at this point.
Yeah, because now some of the animals will be eaten. And yeah, sacrifices will be made. Yeah, because it also says in chapter 9, verse 2, the fear and terror of you will be in every living creature on the earth. They are placed under your authority.
So there's that shift. So all of a sudden, instead of being buds, instead of Noah being able to walk over to King Lion and scratch you behind the ears, better not do that.
Well, no, that's wildlife,
There's
and
a shift
wildlife
taken.
isn't sacrificed.
But still,
just
but the
clean
wildlife
animals.
themselves, there
But
had
now-
to be a level of peacefulness between them and
Before,
mankind
yes.
before.
Mhm.
Jackie?
Back early in chapter 9, verses 3 through 5.
Okay.
I didn't understand that. I thought I needed to unwind that. Because in 3 it says, every crawling thing that is alive will be food for you.
Yep.
And then down in 5 it said, I didn't understand that at all. Surely your lifeblood will I avenge. From every animal, from every person will I avenge it. And from every person's brother will I avenge that person's life. If you could just parse that a bit. Thank you.
That's the first capital punishment announcement. So, and we don't see this because it's in the animal kingdom. But if an animal attacks a human and kills that human, because the life is in the blood,
Yeah.
that's where God is saying that did it slip?
Yep,
Okay,
it changed.
that's where He's saying that animal will be held accountable. It's the same way that God, in God's judgments, if a person intentionally kills a person, then that person forfeits their life because of the person that they killed. And this is the kind of the background for that. Okay, so we're chapter 10.
And the whole thing about food, I think, he's not saying that we can eat all animals. I think he's just saying, before I gave you all the plants and the vegetation to eat, now I'm going to give you meat to eat as well. It's all okay to consume.
Okay.
Because that was part of her question too, I think. Yeah. Genealogies.
Genealogies. Yeah, chapter 10 is all about genealogies.
And we know that God doesn't waste real estate, but we didn't really spend a lot of time discussing the genealogies, but there they are. What can we deduct from this? That we have, really I think the takeaway is that Ham's sons, that from Ham came Canaan.
Yep.
And Canaan is going to be the enemy of Israel later on. And that, and then there was
Canaan was the father of all the ites.
There you go. Canaan was the father of all the ites. Yes. Yeah.
You know, the Semites, Jebusites, Amalekites.
That was a
Hivites,
teaching Dan did
Petulite.
about 4 years ago on all of the ites. No. Oh, wow. She just brought up an Israelite. Benjamite. Right. So we can't say that it was all of the ites that were in the land of Canaan.
You know, she introduced herself as a visitor when she came in this afternoon. So, the Peleg incident, Teresa, this comes back to what you were talking about. When we read about Peleg, which is, he was
Genesis and
Yeah, right after Eber.
Oh, that's right.
Shem. So verse 21. Verse 25. And unto Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg, which literally means division.
We have a
His name,
slight- we have a
Peleg's
slight
name
change.
means division.
Yeah, for during his days the earth
During his
was
days,
divided.
the earth was divided.
There you go.
So you had definitely slipped. You had the shifting of the continents at that point, so that they became. I suspect that they may have been like you could point and go, yeah, right over there is where we used to live. Okay, so there was a separation taking place, but it wasn't like the oceans that we see now because the drift hadn't really started.
That's right. We don't have a pen, sister.
So anyway, Gretchen. So I was talking about the. All right. So the royal we confounds man's language.
Yes.
What's up with that? I mean, why? I mean, what was the big deal? Yeah, because of Babel. They were just building a tower. Where's the other one? Give it to that one. That one.
That one?
Do you really think God thought man could come together in one mind and one accord and actually build a tower all the way to heaven? Do you think he really thought that?
Actually, when we read the text, that wasn't the goal. The goal was to make a name for ourselves.
Yes. To become important.
And they said that they would build a tower into the heavens, but they would make a name for themselves. That was their focus.
So I've got.
Go ahead.
I've got like two. First one, I would say, is another.
Is that
reason.
on?
I don't think that's on.
Hello.
There you go.
Just making sure. Just making sure. All right. So I would say to one degree, it's a disrespect thing. Like a disobedience thing.
Yeah.
Because he had told them to disperse across the earth,
Yes.
multiply and go across the earth. And they
Yes,
did the
that's right.
literal opposite, which was
Disobedience.
to all come together. He's
Yeah.
like, okay, see, that's wrong. Number
That's not
one.
going to work. Yeah.
Number one. All right. Number two, do I need to hello
Yes.
again?
Yeah.
Yes,
okay,
you
go
do.
ahead.
Uh-huh.
Number two.
He only does it when he says hello.
Yeah.
I know, right? Okay, but anyways, yeah. So I think I really think it's a disobedience thing. Is
Okay.
really what it was. is
Well,
the fact
I
that they were
would say
disobeying her.
disobedience and rebellion, even though we haven't been told about rebellion at this point. But the whole idea, or maybe arrogance.
Yeah, arrogance. Also, another thing is by the making a name for themselves. Do you think we were already trying to become like God?
Oh, yes, like Hasatan. Yeah.
We were already trying to go into the
Out
Like
of the
the
mouths
serpent.
of babes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like
let's
the
let's just have the
serpent.
benediction.
Did God really say? Did God really say to disperse and
Exactly.
scatter?
Yep.
Because if you stay here, you'll be like God. Yeah, going all the way back to the serpent.
So as the Torah sisters tell us, Shabbat is a gift from the Creator.
So you know what we could do, y'all? We could go get food and come back and do midrash with all the questions we didn't answer. Like Norris talked about a day being 1,000 years and other things that were written down. If
I
you
don't want
wanna
to
do
talk about that one.
You know, we could all get a plate of food,
That's a good question.
including birthday ice cream
Yeah.
and brownies, and we could come back out here. We could have
We could.
10 minutes
We
back
could
there
do
getting food.
Yep.
Take a little bathroom break, but we are going to dismiss people with the Aaronic blessing.
Yep.
Get the kids out here for that.
Yep.
So let me go gather them
And
up.
we can do that. Yep.
Yes. It was speed drash. Did y'all enjoy it? We
was
got through
different.
11 chapters. Good
we
job,
covered
everybody.
a lot of ground.
All right, y'all. Time to come out and receive the Aaronic blessing. We'll give you a couple minutes to get all cleaned up. But this is always my lament every year, is that we never get to cover Genesis thoroughly. You know, we never really get to talk about it. I don't know why the rabbis gave us 6 chapters of Genesis when the Torah scroll rolls back. It's too much. You know, it's too rich. There's too much meat and gems and diamonds and nuggets. And which it seems like we move on, and then we're in Noah, and then before we know it, Genesis is over. So I hope you enjoyed it, because I really like discussing. I spent 3 hours just doing chapters 1, 2, and 3. on Thursday.
Yes, you did.
Or was it? It was Wednesday when y'all were doing worship rehearsal. That's what I was doing at home. 3 hours of just pouring over 3
Just be glad she didn't bring her
chapters.
tablet. She forgot her tablet. I don't know where it is.
I know the notebook wasn't here to had all my notes.
Yep.
So we're giving the kids
So
just
for
a
you
few
folks
minutes
online,
to
we're
gather
sorry
up
that you
their
weren't
thoughts.
here with us, but we hope you enjoyed what went on. We had a great time here, I think.
Oh, look, Norris and Cynthia, they have a new tallit.
Yep.
That's pretty
Cool.
No.
So
She says it's an old one.
receive the blessing of Adonai as he gave it to Aaron when he told the high priest how to place his name on the people. Yivarakaka Yahweh v'yishmereka, Yair Yahweh panavaleka v'chuneka, Yisa Yahweh panavaleka v'yasem leka shalom. Now, may Yahweh bless you and keep you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift up his face towards you and give you his shalom. Nothing missing, nothing broken, nothing out of place. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah, our Prince of Peace, Amen. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Hey, I don't know who gave Dan the cough lozenges, but thank you because it did wonders.
Teresa and Gretchen. Gretchen gave me one that's got
Oh.
ginger in it.
Thank you so much. 'Cause
She
it's
said,
working.
be careful because it's spicy.
A little spicy.
So for all you folks online, thanks for being with us.
Yes, thanks
I
for
don't know
joining
who we had
us.
back
Yes,
there.
that's right. Shavua Tov, I think
Mike-
Andrew was online. It was nice having you, Andrew.
And Mike, I think, was going to get online with us.
Mike who?
Murphy.
Oh, Mike Murphy, yes.
So anyway, thanks for being with us. We love you guys.
Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Yes.